I'll give you $15 million if you can translate this, Chris Roca said, his voice casual but full of threat, almost as if it was just another day for him. The offer echoed through the room, and everyone froze. No one spoke, but the challenge was clear. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now, let's continue. The exclusive La Dolce Vita restaurant was where the rich and powerful came to eat, to be seen, and to strike deals, some legal, some not so much. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting golden light across marble floors and white linen tablecloths. The air smelled of expensive wine and truffle oil, mixed with the faint trace of cigar smoke that seemed to cling to certain patrons. Tuxedoed waiters glided between tables with practiced precision, their movements choreographed to near perfection. In every shadowed corner, whispers of business deals, political favors, and darker arrangements floated just beneath the surface of polite conversation. Stephanie had been working here for 2 years, and every day felt like a balancing act. The fancy decor, the careful formality, and the undercurrent of danger that seemed to pulse through the restaurant were part of her everyday world. But none of it ever felt real to her. She was just trying to make ends meet, keep her head down, and avoid any real attention. While the guests wore designer clothes and discussed million-dollar transactions, she refilled water glasses and cleared plates, invisible to most of them. That was exactly how she liked it. Tonight, though, something felt different. The tension in the air was heavier, more electric. The private section in the back had been reserved, and Maria, the head waitress, had pulled Stephanie aside earlier with a warning whispered low and urgent. Table 12 is Chris Roca's party. Stay professional, stay quiet, and whatever you do, don't stare. Stephanie knew the name. Everyone in the city did, even people like her who actively avoided the news and local gossip. Chris the Terminator Roca controlled half the underworld operations in the city. His family had built an empire on fear, loyalty, and ruthless efficiency. At 34, he was younger than most men in his position, but that only made him more dangerous. He had nothing to prove and everything to protect. As Stephanie moved through the dining room with a tray of drinks, she caught glimpses of Table 12 through the archway that separated the private section from the main floor. 6 men sat in a loose semicircle, their tailored suits dark and expensive, their voices low and controlled. But it was the man at the center who commanded attention without even trying. Chris Roca sat with the relaxed posture of someone who owned every room he entered. His dark hair was slicked back, his jawline sharp and shadowed with deliberate stubble. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been sewn onto his body, the top buttons of his black shirt undone just enough to reveal a glint of gold chain against tanned skin. A heavy watch caught the light on his wrist, and just beneath his cuff, the edge of a tattoo peeked out. Dark ink against darker implications. His eyes, almost black in the dim light, scanned the room with the calm assessment of a predator. Stephanie delivered the drinks to another table and turned to retreat when a burst of rapid Italian caught her attention. At a table near the archway, an American businessman was entertaining a group of foreign clients. His face was pale, his smile strained and brittle. Sweat beaded at his temples. "I apologize," the businessman was saying, his voice tight with barely concealed panic. "My translator canceled last minute. I don't know what happened, they just—" One of his guests interrupted him in sharp, frustrated Italian, gesturing with both hands. The others joined in, their voices rising, each sentence more agitated than the last. The businessman's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. Whatever deal he was trying to close was unraveling right in front of him, and he was powerless to stop it. Stephanie's feet moved before her brain caught up. "Posso aiutare?" she said quietly, stepping closer to the table. The Italian businessmen turned to her in surprise. For a moment, no one spoke. Then relief washed over their faces like a wave. One of them, An older man with silver hair and an expensive watch leaned forward and spoke rapidly, his words tumbling over each other in a rush of explanation. Stephanie listened, nodding as she followed the thread of his concerns. When he finished, she turned to the American businessman, whose expression had shifted from panic to desperate hope. "They need to finalize the contract terms tonight," Stephanie translated calmly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "Or they'll have to take their business elsewhere. They're concerned about the liability clauses in Section 7 and the payment schedule outlined on page 14. They want clarification before they sign anything." "You speak Italian?" The businessman stared at her like she had just walked on water. "My grandmother was from Sicily," Stephanie said with a modest shrug. "I grew up speaking it at home." The businessman grabbed her hand, shaking it with gratitude that bordered on desperation. "Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you stay? Just for a few minutes?" Stephanie nodded, already mentally calculating how much trouble she might be in with Maria for abandoning her section. But the relief on the man's face made it worth the risk. What she didn't notice was the shift behind her. The conversation at table 12 had stopped. All 6 men had turned their attention toward her, but none more intensely than Chris Roca himself. His dark eyes tracked her every movement, calculating, measuring, assessing. A faint smile played at the corner of his mouth, though it didn't reach his eyes. $15 million. Roca's voice suddenly rang out, smooth and cold, carrying across the restaurant like a challenge. "To anyone here who can translate what I'm about to say." The room went silent. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye in La Dolce Vita turned toward table 12. Roca's men exchanged confused glances. This wasn't typical behavior for their boss. He didn't make public spectacles. He didn't throw money around for entertainment. Everything he did was calculated, purposeful. Several patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few of them clearly understood Italian, judging by the way their eyes flicked between Roca and the exits. But not one person moved. Not one voice spoke up. The risk of engaging with Chris Roca, even for $15 million, was too great. His reputation was a cage that kept everyone frozen in place. Stephanie's heart hammered against her ribs. The businessman she had been helping looked at her with wide eyes, silently begging her not to get involved. Maria stood near the kitchen door, shaking her head frantically. But Stephanie's body had other ideas. Slowly, as if pulled by an invisible thread, she turned toward the private section, toward table 12, toward Chris Roca and his impossible challenge. The distance between them felt like miles, but her feet carried her forward anyway, one step, then another. Roca watched her approach with those unreadable dark eyes. He didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. The patience of a man who always got what he wanted. Stephanie stopped a few feet from his table, her hands clasped in front of her to stop them from shaking. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to apologize, to disappear back into the safety of invisibility she had cultivated so carefully. But something stronger held her in place. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the strange pull of fate, realizing she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "I'll do it," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, but steady enough to carry. Roca's smile widened, just a fraction. "Will you now?" As Stephanie stands there, feeling the weight of the $15 million offer settle over her, she's not sure what she's stepping into. She knows Chris Roca isn't a man to be trifled with, and his interest in her isn't something she can walk away from. But what she doesn't know yet is that this simple act of translating will uncover a truth about herself and her family that she could never have anticipated. The world she once saw from the sidelines is now her new reality, one full of power, danger, and unexpected twists that will force her to confront more than just mafia politics. But for now, as the eyes of the restaurant are fixed on her, Stephanie has only one choice. She steps forward. This is just the beginning. Rocca leaned back in his chair, studying Stephanie with the kind of attention that made her skin prickle. He picked up his glass of whiskey, swirling it slowly, the amber liquid catching the light. Then, without breaking eye contact, he spoke in rapid Italian, his accent flawless, his tone deliberate. The words themselves were simple, a basic business inquiry about import schedules and distribution networks. But the way he delivered them, the weight he gave each syllable, made it clear this wasn't really about business at all. This was a test. Stephanie took a breath, forcing her mind to focus past the fear humming through her veins. She translated clearly, her voice stronger than she expected. "You're asking about the timeline for the next shipment and whether the distribution channels through the northern ports are still viable given the recent regulatory changes." Rocca's eyebrow lifted slightly. He said something else in Italian, this time more complex, weaving in financial terms and veiled references that could mean legitimate business or something far darker. Stephanie caught every nuance, every double meaning, and translated it all with careful precision. "You want to know if your partners are prepared to handle increased volume without drawing attention from authorities, and whether the payment structure needs to be adjusted to account for additional risk." A murmur rippled through the restaurant. Several of Rocca's men exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of surprise and respect. Even the businessman Stephanie had helped earlier was watching with open amazement. Rocca set down his glass and smiled, a real smile this time that actually reached his eyes, though it did nothing to make him seem less dangerous. "Impressive," he said in English, his voice smooth as silk over steel. "Most translators stumble over the technical terms. You didn't even hesitate." "My grandmother was very thorough," Stephanie replied, keeping her tone neutral, professional. Her hands were still clasped in front of her, squeezing just hard enough to keep them from trembling. Rocca gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Stephanie glanced toward Maria, who was still hovering near the kitchen, her face a mask of worry. But there was no graceful way to refuse, not with every eye in the restaurant watching. Stephanie moved around the table and lowered herself into the chair, perching on the edge like she might need to bolt at any moment. Up close, Rocca was even more imposing. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker, leather and smoke. The tattoo on his wrist extended further than she had realized, intricate patterns that disappeared beneath his sleeve. His hands were broad, strong, with scars across the knuckles that told stories she probably didn't want to know. "You handled that well," Rocca said, his voice quieter now, meant only for her. "Most people freeze when I look at them. You didn't." "I was terrified," Stephanie admitted before she could stop herself. "But you did it anyway." Rocca tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "That's more interesting than confidence. Confidence can be fake. Courage, real courage, that's rare." Stephanie didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Rocca leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on the table, his fingers steepled together. When he spoke again, his voice carried a different quality, something almost curious. "What do you see when you look at a man like me?" The question caught her completely off guard. It was personal, probing, and far more dangerous than anything involving Italian translations. Stephanie's first instinct was to give him the answer he probably wanted to hear, something flattering or fearful or both. But the intensity in his gaze made it clear he would know if she lied. She took a moment, really looking at him. Not at the expensive suit, or the commanding presence, or the reputation that preceded him like a storm cloud. She looked at his eyes, dark and unreadable, but not empty. There was intelligence there, calculation, but also something else, something almost lonely. "I don't see either yet," she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. Rocca's expression shifted, the carefully maintained mask slipping just for a second. "Either what?" "Monster or man," Stephanie clarified, meeting his gaze despite every instinct telling her to look away. "Everyone talks about you like you're one or the other. But I just met you. I don't see either yet." The silence that followed felt infinite. Roka's men had gone very still, watching their boss with wary attention, waiting to see how he would react to such boldness. The restaurant itself seemed to hold its breath. Then Roka laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and something that might have been delight. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head slowly. "Monster or man," he repeated, tasting the words. "No one has ever said that to me before." "Maybe no one was honest with you before," Stephanie said, then immediately regretted it. That was too far, too familiar, but Roka's smile only widened. "Maybe not." He studied her for another long moment, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table toward her. The 15 million was never really about the translation. It was about finding someone who could handle pressure without breaking. "You did well tonight, Stephanie." She startled at the sound of her name. She hadn't told him what it was. "I know everyone who works in my city," Roka said, reading her expression. "Especially in places like this." He tapped the business card with one finger. "Call that number tomorrow. We have things to discuss." "I'm just a waitress," Stephanie said, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "I don't have anything you could possibly need." "You underestimate yourself." Roka stood, and his men immediately rose with him, moving in synchronized precision. He buttoned his suit jacket, the gesture casual but somehow threatening. "Tomorrow, Stephanie, don't make me send someone to find you." Then he was gone, his entourage flowing around him like a dark tide as they moved toward the exit. The restaurant exhaled collectively, conversations resuming in hushed, excited tones. But Stephanie remained frozen in her chair, staring at the business card in front of her like it might explode. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. She picked up the card with trembling fingers. It was simple, elegant, with just a phone number embossed in gold. No name, no title, nothing to identify it. But she knew exactly who it belonged to. Maria appeared at her elbow, pulling her up from the chair with surprising strength. "What were you thinking?" she hissed, though her eyes were wide with something closer to awe than anger. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" "I translated," Stephanie said weakly, though she knew it was more than that, so much more. "You caught the attention of Chris Roka," Maria said, gripping both of Stephanie's shoulders. "That's not something you walk away from. That's not something anyone walks away from." Stephanie looked down at the card in her hand, then back toward the door where Roka had disappeared. Her mind was racing, spiraling through the implications of what had just happened. She had drawn the attention of one of the most dangerous men in the city. Everything Maria said was true. This wasn't something she could ignore or run from. But there was something else, something she hadn't expected. The $15 million. If Roka was serious, if even a fraction of that money could be hers, it would solve everything. Her mother's medical bills that had been piling up for months, her younger brother's tuition that she had been desperately trying to cover, the rent that was already 2 weeks overdue, all of it could disappear with one phone call. The thought made her feel sick and hopeful in equal measure. "I need to think," Stephanie said, pulling away from Maria's grip. She tucked the card into her apron pocket, where it felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. "I just need to think." But as she returned to her section, mechanically clearing tables and refilling water glasses, she knew the truth. There was nothing to think about. Chris Roka had made his interest clear, and in his world, interest wasn't a question, it was a statement. Whether she called that number or not, whether she wanted this or not, her life had already changed. The moment she stepped forward and accepted his challenge, she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. And somewhere, in the quiet space between fear and possibility, a part of her wondered if maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Stephanie didn't call the number the next day, or the day after that. The business card sat on her nightstand like a ticking bomb, its gold-embossed numbers catching the morning light every time she woke up. She told herself she was being careful, thoughtful, that she needed time to consider her options. But the truth was simpler and more terrifying. She was afraid of what would happen when she finally picked up the phone. Her small apartment felt even smaller now, the walls closing in with the weight of unanswered questions. She went through the motions of her life, working her shifts at La Dolce Vita, avoiding Maria's worried glances, lying awake at night staring at the ceiling. But her mind kept circling back to the same moment, replaying it over and over, the way Roca had looked at her, the way he'd said her name like he'd known her for years. I know everyone who works in my city. On the third night, unable to sleep, Stephanie found herself sitting at her laptop with a cup of cold coffee, typing her grandfather's name into the search bar. Antonio Marchetti. She had been young when he died, maybe 7 or 8, and her memories of him were fragmented. A gentle smile, the smell of cigars and aftershave, the way he always slipped her candy when her mother wasn't looking. The search results were sparse at first, an obituary from 15 years ago, a few mentions in old census records, nothing remarkable. But then she added New York and 1980s to the search, and something shifted. A newspaper archive appeared, a digitized article from 1987 with a grainy photograph. Stephanie clicked on it, her heart already racing before she even knew why. The article was about a federal investigation into organized crime. Several names were listed as persons of interest, suspected of involvement in racketeering and money laundering. And there, buried in the middle of the third paragraph, was her grandfather's name. She read the article 3 times, her hands shaking so badly she could barely control the mouse. Antonio Marchetti, suspected associate of the Moretti crime family. Questioned but never charged. Believed to have provided financial consulting services to various organized crime operations throughout the tri-state area. The Moretti family. She didn't recognize the name at first, but a quick search made her stomach drop. The Moretti family had been one of the major crime syndicates in New York before a series of power struggles in the early 2000s led to their absorption into other organizations, including, according to one article, the Rocca family. Stephanie pushed away from the laptop, her breath coming too fast. This couldn't be real. Her grandfather, the man who had taught her to play chess and told her stories about the old country, had been involved with the mafia? It was impossible. Except the evidence was right there in black and white, archived and undeniable. She needed answers. Real answers. Which meant there was only one person she could ask, even though the thought made her want to scream. Her father. They hadn't spoken in over a year, not since their last fight about money he claimed she owed him for some imagined slight from her childhood. But he had been close to his father. If anyone knew the truth, it would be him. Stephanie picked up her phone before she could talk herself out of it, scrolling to his contact. Her finger hovered over the call button for a long moment, then she pressed it. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice rough with sleep or alcohol, maybe both. Stephanie, do you know what time it is? I need to talk to you about Grandpa, she said, skipping any pretense of pleasantries. About Antonio Marchetti and what he really did for a living. The silence on the other end was answer enough. Dad, Stephanie pressed, her voice harder now. I found articles. I know he was involved with the Moretti family. I need you to tell me the truth. Her father sighed, a long exhale that sounded like years of held secrets finally escaping. You should have left this alone, Stephanie. Some things are better left buried. Well, they're not buried anymore, she snapped. So tell me, was Grandpa part of the mafia? Another pause. Then, he wasn't a made man, if that's what you're asking. But yes, he worked with them. Financial consulting mostly. Legitimate on the surface, but he knew where the money came from. He helped them hide it, move it, clean it. Her father's voice was hollow, defeated. He did what he had to do to survive, to take care of us. That world, it doesn't let you say no once you're in. Stephanie felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Why didn't anyone tell me? What were we supposed to say? Hey, sweetheart, your grandfather was a criminal? We wanted to protect you from it. Your mother especially. She made me promise never to tell you. He paused. How did you even find out? It doesn't matter, Stephanie said, though the image of Chris Roca's knowing smile flashed through her mind. What matters is that someone else knows. Someone dangerous. Her father went very quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was tight with fear. Who? Chris Roca. The sound her father made was somewhere between a gasp and a groan. Jesus Christ, Stephanie, what did you do? I didn't do anything, she protested. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. She had stepped forward. She had accepted the challenge. She had caught his attention. He offered me money to translate something, that's all. That's never all with people like him, her father said, and for once he sounded genuinely concerned rather than just drunk and bitter. If Roca knows about your connection to the Moretti family, about your grandfather, then he knows your leverage. You're a piece on a board you don't even know you're playing on. The words settled over her like ice water. What am I supposed to do? I don't know, her father admitted. But Stephanie, listen to me. These people, they don't forget, and they don't forgive. If Roca has decided you're part of his world now, there's no walking away from it, not without consequences. They talked for a few more minutes, her father sharing fragments of stories about her grandfather, things he had witnessed as a child that he'd tried to forget. By the time they hung up, Stephanie felt hollowed out, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. She looked at the business card on her nightstand. She didn't have to call. She could run, leave the city, start over somewhere else. But even as the thought formed, she knew it was fantasy. Roca had said he knew everyone in his city. If he wanted to find her, he would. The decision, it seemed, had already been made for her. 2 days later, a car arrived at her apartment. Black, expensive, with tinted windows and a driver who didn't smile. He handed her a note written on thick cardstock in elegant script. Dinner tonight, 8 p.m. The car will wait. No signature, no address. Just an assumption of compliance that made her teeth clench. Stephanie thought about ignoring it. She thought about a lot of things. But in the end, she got in the car. They drove for 20 minutes, leaving the busy streets of the city for quieter neighborhoods with tree-lined avenues and houses set back from the road behind iron gates. The car finally stopped in front of a restaurant Stephanie had never heard of, small and exclusive, the kind of place that didn't advertise because it didn't need to. Roca was waiting in a private dining room at the back, sitting at a table set for two. He stood when she entered, the gesture almost courteous, though nothing about his presence felt safe. "Stephanie," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I'm glad you decided to come." "Did I have a choice?" she asked, not bothering to hide the edge in her voice. "There's always a choice," Roca replied, though his smile suggested otherwise. "Sit, please." She sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. A waiter appeared immediately, pouring wine she didn't remember ordering, then disappearing like smoke. Roca watched her for a moment, then said, "You've been looking into your family history." It wasn't a question. Stephanie felt her stomach twist. "How did you know that?" "Because I would have done the same thing in your position." He took a sip of his wine, completely relaxed. Antonio Marchetti was a smart man, brilliant with numbers, discreet, loyal. My family valued those qualities. "Your family," Stephanie repeated slowly. "The article said he worked with the Moretti family." "The Moretti family became part of my family 15 years ago," Roca explained, setting down his glass. "When the old power structures collapsed, we absorbed what remained, including all the old connections, all the old debts, all the old loyalties." He leaned forward slightly. "Your grandfather worked closely with my grandfather. They were partners in certain ventures." That connection, that history, it doesn't just disappear. Stephanie's chest felt tight. So what does that have to do with me? I didn't even know about any of this until a few days ago. Bloodlines matter in my world, Roka said, his voice taking on a harder edge. Legacy matters. Your grandfather helped build something that still exists today, that still benefits my family. That makes you part of that legacy, whether you knew about it or not. I'm not part of anything, Stephanie insisted, her voice rising despite her attempt to stay calm. I'm a waitress. I had nothing to do with whatever my grandfather did decades ago. But you do now, Roka said simply. The moment you stepped forward at La Dolce Vita, you activated a connection that's been dormant for years. You proved you have skills, courage, intelligence. You proved you're your grandfather's granddaughter. His eyes locked onto hers, intense and unwavering. I'm here to protect what's mine, and you are mine to protect now. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. I don't belong to anyone, Stephanie said, forcing steel into her voice even as her hands trembled. Not belong, Roka corrected almost gently. Under my protection. There's a difference. Your family's connection to mine means you have value to my enemies. They will use you to get to me if they can. I won't allow that. Stephanie wanted to argue, to push back against the cage he was building around her with words. But part of her, the part that had spent 3 sleepless nights worrying about this exact moment, knew he was right. She had stumbled into something far bigger than a translation job, and there was no stumbling back out. What do you want from me? She finally asked. Roka smiled, and this time it almost looked genuine. For now, just dinner, and your trust, eventually. The rest we'll figure out together. Dinner was a carefully orchestrated dance of tension and civility. Roka ordered for both of them without asking, dishes that arrived in perfect succession, each more elaborate than the last. Stephanie barely tasted any of it. Her mind was too busy trying to map the borders of the trap she'd walked into, searching for exits that probably didn't exist. You're not eating, Roka observed, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. I'm not particularly hungry, Stephanie replied, pushing a piece of pasta around her plate. Understandable. He set down his knife and fork, giving her his full attention in a way that made her feel simultaneously seen and exposed. I know this is a lot to process. Your whole world has shifted in the span of a few days. But I need you to understand something, Stephanie. I'm not your enemy. You're not my friend either, she said before she could stop herself. Roka's lips quirked into something that might have been amusement. No, not yet. But I could be an ally. And in the world you've just entered, allies are the difference between survival and becoming a casualty. He leaned back in his chair, the movement casual but calculated, like everything else about him. Let me be clear about what I'm offering. You work with me, provide assistance when I need your particular skills, translations, insights, occasionally your presence at certain events. In exchange, you receive my protection, my resources, and compensation that will make your financial problems disappear. What kind of assistance? Stephanie asked, her voice wary. Nothing illegal, Roka said, though the slight pause before he spoke made her doubt the truth of it. Mostly translations, like you did at the restaurant. I deal with international partners regularly. Having someone I can trust, someone with your family connections, that has value to me. And the protection? Stephanie pressed. Protection from what, exactly? Roka's expression darkened slightly. From people who would use you to hurt me, the Bianca family for one. They've been looking for leverage against me for months. When word gets out that Antonio Marchetti's granddaughter is under my employ, they'll see an opportunity. Then maybe I shouldn't be under your employ, Stephanie said, though even as she spoke, she knew how naive it sounded. It's too late for that, Roka said, not unkindly. They already know. One of my men reported back that the Bianchis have been asking questions about you. The moment you walked into that private dining room, You became visible, and visibility in this world is dangerous. Fear coiled in Stephanie's stomach, cold and sharp. You're saying I'm in danger because I helped translate a conversation? I'm saying you're in danger because of who your grandfather was and who I am. Roka's voice was firm, but not harsh. But with my protection, that danger becomes manageable. Without it, he let the sentence hang, unfinished but clear. Stephanie felt the walls closing in again, the illusion of choice evaporating with each passing moment. This is insane. A week ago, I was just serving tables. Now you're telling me I need a mafia boss to keep me safe from other mafia families? Yes, Roka said simply. That's exactly what I'm telling you. She wanted to scream, to flip the table, to do something that would shatter the calm certainty in his voice. Instead, she forced herself to breathe, to think. Her mother's medical bills flashed through her mind, her brother's tuition, the eviction notice she'd found taped to her door yesterday. All of it could go away. But at what cost? What if I say no? She asked quietly. Roka studied her for a long moment. Then I'll still protect you, because that's what honor demands. Your grandfather helped my family, and we don't forget debts. But you'll have no say in how that protection looks. You'll be a liability I have to manage rather than an asset I can rely on. He paused, his dark eyes never leaving hers. And the money, the solutions to your problems, those disappear. So it's not really a choice at all, Stephanie said bitterly. It's the best choice available to you right now, Roka countered. And Stephanie, I need you to understand something. He leaned forward, his voice dropping lower, more intimate. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to keep you alive. The world my grandfather and yours built together, it has rules, old rules. And one of them is that family takes care of family. Whether you like it or not, that's what we are now. There was something in his voice, something beneath the layers of authority and threat, that sounded almost genuine. Stephanie searched his face, looking for the lie, but all she found was an intensity that made her breath catch. I need time, she said finally. Time to think about this. You have until tomorrow night, Roka said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. After that, decisions will be made for you. I'd prefer they be yours. The waiter appeared to clear their plates, and the moment fractured. Roka's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. I need to take this, he said, standing. Don't leave, I'll be right back. He walked toward the door, phone already to his ear, his voice too low to hear. Stephanie sat alone in the private dining room, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. This was insane, all of it. And yet, some small, traitorous part of her mind was already calculating. The money would change everything. Her mother could get the surgery she needed. Her brother could finish school. She could stop drowning in debt and actually breathe for the first time in years. But the price was her freedom, or what was left of it. Roka returned a few minutes later, his expression darker than before. He didn't sit back down. Instead, he stood by the table, his hand resting on the back of his chair. We need to go, he said, his voice clipped. Now. What's wrong? Stephanie asked, alarm spiking through her. The Bianchis, Roka said, already moving toward the door. They know you're here. My men spotted 2 of their cars circling the block. He looked back at her, his expression hard but controlled. This is what I was talking about, Stephanie. This is the danger. So you can either come with me willingly, or I can have my men carry you out. But we're leaving, right now. Stephanie's mind raced. She could run, try to escape out another door, call the police. But even as the thoughts formed, she knew how foolish they were. Roka was right. She was already in the middle of this, whether she wanted to be or not. She stood, her legs unsteady. Okay, let's go. Roka moved to her side immediately, his hand light but firm on her lower back, steering her through the restaurant's kitchen toward a back exit. His men materialized around them, 3 of them forming a protective barrier as they moved through narrow hallways that smelled of garlic and wine. They burst out into an alley where 2 black SUVs were already waiting, engines running. Roka opened the door to the first one and practically pushed Stephanie inside, sliding in beside her. The door slammed shut, and they were moving before she even had her seatbelt on. "Stay down," Roka ordered, his voice sharp with command. Stephanie ducked instinctively as the SUV accelerated, tires squealing against pavement. Through the tinted windows, she caught glimpses of another car, dark and aggressive, trying to keep pace. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Are they following us?" she asked, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. "Not for long," Roka said. He was on his phone again, barking orders in rapid Italian. "Marco, cut them off at the intersection. Vincent, take the secondary route. I want them blocked before we hit the expressway." The car swerved hard to the right, throwing Stephanie against Roka's solid frame. His arm came around her automatically, steadying her, keeping her anchored. The gesture was protective, instinctive, and for a moment, she forgot to be afraid of him because she was too busy being afraid of everything else. The chase lasted maybe 5 minutes, though it felt like hours. When they finally slowed, merging into normal traffic, Roka's phone buzzed again. He answered it, listened, then allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. "They're handled," he said, tucking the phone away. "The Bianchis won't be following us anymore tonight." Stephanie slowly sat up, her hands shaking. What does handled mean? "It means they're not dead, if that's what you're worried about," Roka said, his tone almost gentle. "Just discouraged." Strongly. She stared at him, this man who had just orchestrated a car chase through city streets with the same calm efficiency he'd used to order dinner. The contrast was dizzying. "This is my life now?" she asked, the reality of it finally crashing down on her. "Car chases and rival families and constant danger?" "Only if you don't accept my protection," Roka said. "Make the right choice, Stephanie, and most of this disappears. You'll be under my umbrella. Untouchable." The car pulled up in front of her apartment building. Roka's men had already positioned themselves around the perimeter, their presence both reassuring and terrifying. "Think about what happened tonight," Roka said as he walked her to her door, 2 of his men flanking them. "Think about what could have happened if I hadn't been there. Then ask yourself if you can really afford to say no." He waited until she was inside, the door locked behind her, before he left. Stephanie stood in her tiny apartment, still shaking, and looked around at the life she'd built. The precarious, struggling, barely holding together life that suddenly felt impossibly fragile. She thought about her mother's medical bills, her brother's tuition, the eviction notice, and now the very real threat of a rival mafia family using her as leverage in a war she didn't understand. Roka was right. She couldn't afford to say no. But more than that, and this was the part that scared her most, she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to anymore. Something had shifted tonight, in that moment when his arm had come around her in the car, protective and solid, something that felt dangerously close to trust. Or maybe, something even more dangerous than that. Stephanie didn't sleep that night. She sat on her couch with all the lights on, jumping at every sound in the hallway, every car that passed on the street below. When dawn finally broke, gray and unwelcoming, she felt hollowed out, exhausted in a way that went deeper than physical tiredness. She called in sick to work. Maria would be furious, but Stephanie couldn't bring herself to care. The restaurant, her old life, all of it felt like it belonged to someone else now. Someone who didn't have mafia families chasing her through city streets. By noon, she'd made her decision. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on Roka's card. He answered on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call." "I'm in," Stephanie said, her voice flat with resignation. "Whatever arrangement you're offering, I accept. There was a pause, then Roka's voice came back warmer. Good. That's the smart choice, Stephanie. I'll send a car for you this evening. We'll handle the paperwork and get you set up properly. Paperwork? She repeated. Legitimate employment contracts, Roka explained. You'll be a consultant for one of my businesses, legal, taxable, completely above board. I run legitimate operations alongside everything else. This arrangement will be one of them. After they hung up, Stephanie felt a strange mix of relief and dread. The decision was made. For better or worse, she was part of Chris Roka's world now. She needed to tell her family, or at least the family she still spoke to. Her mother was too fragile, too sick to handle this news, but her uncle, her mother's brother, might understand. Uncle Marco had always been the practical one, the problem solver. Maybe he could help her make sense of all this. She called him that afternoon, asking if she could come by. He agreed immediately, his voice full of concern when she told him she needed advice about something important. Uncle Marco lived in a modest house in Queens, the kind of place that spoke of middle-class stability. He greeted her at the door with a warm hug and the smell of coffee already brewing. You sounded upset on the phone, he said, leading her into his living room. What's going on, sweetheart? Stephanie sat on the worn couch trying to figure out where to start. I need to tell you something, and I need you to not freak out. Marco's expression shifted to worry. Okay, I'm listening. I've gotten involved with some people, Stephanie began carefully. Dangerous people. And I found out that Grandpa Antonio, he was connected to them too, to the Mafia. She watched her uncle's face, waiting for shock or denial. Instead, his expression went carefully blank. You knew, Stephanie said, realization dawning. You've known this whole time. Marco sighed heavily. Your mother made me promise never to tell you. She wanted you to have a normal life, away from all that. Well, it's too late for that now, Stephanie said bitterly. She explained everything. The restaurant, the translation, Chris Roka, the car chase with the Bianchi family. With each detail, her uncle's expression grew darker. Chris Roka, Marco repeated when she finished. You're working for Chris Roka now? I don't have a choice, Stephanie protested. The Bianchis are already targeting me. Roka says he can protect me. And you believe him? Marco stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Stephanie, these people, they don't protect anyone but themselves. Roka is using you, can't you see that? Maybe, Stephanie admitted. But what else am I supposed to do? Run? Hide? They'll find me anyway. Marco turned to face her, and something in his expression made her stomach drop. There was fear there, but also something else. Something calculating. There might be another way, he said slowly. Another family that could offer you protection. Better protection. What are you talking about? Stephanie asked, unease prickling along her spine. The Bianchi family, Marco said, and the words landed like stones. They're not as violent as Roka makes them out to be. They're businessmen, more modern in their approach. If you went to them, explained your situation, they could— Are you insane? Stephanie interrupted, standing up. The Bianchis are the ones who chased me through the city last night. They're the threat Roka is protecting me from. Because that's what Roka told you, Marco said, his voice rising. But have you considered that maybe he's lying? That maybe he's the real threat, and he's manipulating you into thinking you need him? Stephanie stared at her uncle, pieces clicking together in her mind with sickening clarity. How do you know so much about the Bianchi family? Marco's jaw tightened. I've done business with them. Legitimate business. They're not monsters, Stephanie. What kind of business? She demanded, her voice sharp. Import and export, Marco said, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Consulting work. Nothing illegal. You're lying, Stephanie said, her heart pounding. You're working with them, aren't you? With the Bianchis. I'm trying to help you, Marco insisted, but the desperation in his voice confirmed her suspicions. Oh my God, Stephanie breathed, backing toward the door. You've been working with them this whole time. That's how they knew about me so quickly. You told them. I was trying to create options for you, Marco said, moving toward her. Rocca is dangerous, Stephanie. I was trying to give you a way out. By selling me to his enemies? Stephanie's voice cracked. How much are they paying you, Uncle Marco? What's the price for betraying your own family? It's not like that, Marco said, but his voice lacked conviction. Stephanie fumbled for the door handle, her vision blurring with tears of rage and betrayal. Stay away from me. Stay away from my mother. If you contact us again, I'll tell Rocca everything. She ran from the house, her uncle's voice calling after her, but she didn't stop. She got into her car and drove, not sure where she was going, just knowing she needed to move, needed to escape the feeling of walls closing in from all sides. Her phone rang. Rocca's number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. We need to talk. Rocca's voice was ice. Now. My men will pick you up in 10 minutes. Don't make me come find you. How did you? Your uncle's house is being watched, Rocca said, cutting her off. Has been for days. We recorded your entire conversation. So yes, Stephanie, we need to talk about betrayal. The line went dead. 20 minutes later, Stephanie stood in what appeared to be Rocca's private office. A space of dark wood and leather that smelled of expensive cigars. He sat behind his desk, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely angry. Sit, he ordered. Stephanie sat, her hands shaking in her lap. Did you know? Rocca asked, his voice dangerously quiet. About your uncle's connection to the Bianchis? No, Stephanie said firmly. I swear I had no idea until today. I went to him for advice, that's all. Advice, Rocca repeated, his tone dripping with disdain. From a man who's been feeding information to my enemies for months. Do you have any idea how this looks? I didn't know, Stephanie repeated, her voice rising with frustration and fear. How was I supposed to know my own uncle would betray me? Because that's how this world works, Rocca snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. The sound made her flinch. Everyone has an angle. Everyone has a price. Your naivety isn't charming anymore, Stephanie. It's dangerous. It puts me at risk, my men at risk, everything I've built at risk. Then let me go, Stephanie shot back, anger overriding her fear. If I'm such a liability, if you can't trust me, then just let me walk away. It's too late for that, Rocca said, standing. He moved around the desk, towering over her. You know too much now. You're connected to me publicly. Letting you go would be seen as weakness, and weakness in my world gets you killed. So what? I'm a prisoner now? Stephanie stood too, refusing to let him intimidate her even though her legs felt like water. You talk about protection and partnership, but it sounds like I'm just property to you. Something to be managed and controlled. I'm trying to keep you alive, Rocca growled. By questioning my loyalty, by treating me like a suspect, Stephanie's voice cracked. I came to you honestly today. I called you immediately when I realized what my uncle was doing. What more do you want from me? I want to know I can trust you, Rocca said, and for a moment something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. I want to know that when things get complicated, when your family pulls you in one direction and I pull you in another, you'll make the right choice. The right choice, Stephanie repeated bitterly. You mean your choice? I mean the choice that keeps you breathing, Rocca said. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture uncharacteristically frustrated. You have no idea how close you came to dying today. If you had listened to your uncle, if you had gone to the Bianchis, they would have used you and then disposed of you the moment you stopped being useful. That's who they are. And who are you? Stephanie demanded. Someone better? Someone I should trust with my life when you can't even trust me with the truth about my own family? The question hung between them, heavy with accusation. Rocca's expression hardened. Get out. What? Get out of my office, he said, his voice cold again. The vulnerable moment vanished. Go home. Think about what you want. But Stephanie, understand this. If you're going to be part of my world, you need to grow up fast. The innocent waitress routine won't protect you anymore. Decide if you can handle what this really means, or don't waste any more of my time." Stephanie felt tears burning behind her eyes. But she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of him. She turned and walked to the door, her spine straight despite everything inside her crumbling. "Stephanie!" Rocca's voice stopped her at the threshold. She didn't turn around. "Your uncle will be dealt with," he said quietly. "But I won't kill him. Not unless he forces my hand. That's my compromise. That's me trying to meet you halfway." Stephanie left without responding, the door closing behind her with a soft click that felt like the end of something she couldn't name. 3 days passed in tense silence. Stephanie went through the motions of her life like a ghost, showing up for shifts at La Dolce Vita, ignoring Maria's concerned questions, and spending her nights staring at her ceiling. Rocca's words echoed in her head on repeat. "Decide if you can handle what this really means, or don't waste any more of my time." She hadn't called him. He hadn't called her. The 2 security men stationed outside her apartment building were the only evidence that he still considered her worth protecting. They didn't speak to her, just maintained their silent vigil, a constant reminder of the world she couldn't escape. On the 4th morning, everything changed. Stephanie was making coffee when someone knocked on her door. Not the buzzer from downstairs, an actual knock. She froze, her hand hovering over the coffee pot. The security detail would have stopped anyone from getting up here, unless they couldn't. She approached the door slowly, peering through the peephole. A man in an expensive suit stood in the hallway, his hands clasped in front of him, his expression patient. Behind him, she could see one of Rocca's men slumped against the wall, unconscious, but breathing. "Miss Marchetti," the man called through the door, his voice cultured and calm. "My name is Vincent Bianchi. I'm here on behalf of my family. We mean you no harm. We simply wish to talk." Stephanie's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at her phone on the counter, too far away to reach without turning her back on the door. "I know you're frightened," Vincent continued, "but we took great care not to seriously injure Mr. Rocca's men. They're merely sleeping. We could have done much worse. That should tell you something about our intentions." Against every instinct, Stephanie found herself asking, "What do you want?" "To offer you a choice," Vincent said. "A real choice. Not the illusion of one that Chris Rocca has been selling you. 5 minutes of your time, Miss Marchetti. That's all I ask. If you don't like what I have to say, I'll leave, and you can call Rocca immediately." Stephanie's hand trembled as she reached for the deadbolt. This was stupid, reckless. Exactly the kind of naivety Rocca had accused her of. But some part of her, the part that was exhausted from being pulled in different directions by men who thought they knew what was best for her, needed to hear what Vincent Bianchi had to say. She opened the door. Vincent Bianchi was younger than she expected, maybe 40, with salt and pepper hair and sharp green eyes that assessed her with the same calculating intensity as Rocca's, but without the underlying menace. He smiled, the gesture almost apologetic. "Thank you," he said. "May I come in?" Stephanie stepped aside, leaving the door open. Vincent entered but stayed near the entrance, his hands visible, his posture deliberately non-threatening. "I'll be direct," Vincent said. "My family is aware of your situation. Your connection to the Moretti organization through your grandfather, your current entanglement with Chris Rocca, and the unfortunate involvement of your uncle in matters that have complicated everything." "My uncle is a traitor," Stephanie said, her voice harder than she felt. "Your uncle is a man trying to survive in a world he never should have entered," Vincent corrected gently. "He made poor choices, yes, but his intentions were to help you, misguided as they were. He sold me out. He tried to create options for you," Vincent said, "which brings me to why I'm here. Miss Marchetti, my family would like to offer you a proposal. A way out of this entire mess that benefits everyone involved." Stephanie crossed her arms. "I'm listening." "My son, Marco, is 28 years old," Vincent began. "He's being groomed to take over certain aspects of our family business. He needs a wife, someone with the right connections, the right pedigree, someone whose family history ties her to the old structures but whose own hands are clean." The words took a moment to penetrate. When they did, Stephanie actually laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "You're asking me to marry your son? Are you insane?" "I'm offering you a way to end this war before it truly begins," Vincent said, his tone patient. "A marriage alliance between our families would neutralize you as a point of conflict. Rolka couldn't claim protection rights over you if you were a Bianca. Your uncle's debts would be forgiven. Your mother would receive the best medical care available, paid for entirely by my family. Your brother's education, guaranteed." Stephanie shook her head, backing away. "This is medieval. You can't just buy people with marriage proposals." "Can't we?" Vincent's expression remained calm. "What do you think Rolka is doing? He's claimed you as his property, wrapped it in pretty words about protection and legacy, but the result is the same. You're a piece on his chessboard. At least with my proposal, you'd have a defined role, legal protections, and a family that would actually value you rather than just what you represent." "I don't even know your son," Stephanie protested. "You'd meet him before any decisions were made," Vincent assured her. "Marco is a good man, educated, respectful. He understands this would be a partnership, not a love match. You'd have your own life, your own space. All we'd ask is that you appear at family functions and allow us to say you're under our protection." "And if I refuse?" Vincent's expression darkened slightly. "Then the current situation continues to escalate. Roka and my family move toward open war. People die. Your family becomes collateral damage. Your uncle certainly does. And you remain trapped in Roka's orbit, never quite sure if you're a guest or a prisoner." "That's a threat," Stephanie said, anger flaring. "It's a reality check," Vincent corrected. "I'm not threatening you, Miss Marchetti. I'm offering you agency in a situation where you currently have none. Think about it. You have 48 hours to decide." He pulled out a business card, setting it on the small table by the door. Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. Stephanie stood frozen, her mind racing. Marriage? They wanted her to marry into their family like she was some Victorian bride being traded for political alliance. It was absurd, archaic, impossible. And yet, as she thought about the medical bills and her brother's tuition and the constant fear that had become her new normal, a small, traitorous part of her wondered if it might actually be the smartest choice. She grabbed her phone and dialed Roka's number with shaking hands. He answered immediately. "Where are you?" "My apartment. Vincent Bianchi was just here." Silence. Then, in a voice that could cut glass, "What did he want?" "He offered me a marriage proposal," Stephanie said, and heard Roka's sharp intake of breath. "To his son Marco. He says it would end the conflict between your families." "And what did you tell him?" Roka's voice was dangerously quiet. "I didn't tell him anything. I called you." "Stay where you are. I'm coming to you. Don't open the door for anyone else." The line went dead. 20 minutes later, Roka burst through her door, his men flanking him. His face was a mask of controlled fury as he scanned the apartment, checking corners and windows like he expected Bianchi's soldiers to be hiding in her closets. "Tell me everything," he demanded. Word for word. Stephanie recounted the entire conversation, watching Roka's expression grow darker with each sentence. When she finished, he paced her small living room like a caged predator. "This is a power play," he said, more to himself than to her. "Vincent knows I've claimed protection over you. A marriage alliance would nullify that claim and give them leverage over the old Moretti connections through your grandfather's bloodline." "He said it would end the conflict," Stephanie offered weakly. Roka turned on her, his eyes blazing. "It would end it by handing them a victory, by making me look weak. Do you understand what that would do? Every family that's been waiting for me to show vulnerability would see this as an opening. I'd be fighting wars on 5 different fronts within a month. So this is about your reputation, Stephanie said, anger creeping into her voice. Not about me, or what might actually be best for me. What's best for you is staying alive, Roca shot back. Do you think the Bianchis are offering this out of kindness? Marco Bianchi is a spoiled, violent drunk who's been through 3 girlfriends in the last 2 years. One of them ended up in the hospital. They want you because you're valuable, not because they care about your well-being. And you're so different? Stephanie demanded. You've questioned my loyalty, treated me like a suspect, and now you're telling me I can't even consider other options because it would make you look weak? I'm telling you that accepting this proposal would be suicide, Roca said, his voice rising. You'd be jumping from the frying pan into the fire, and there would be nothing I could do to protect you once you were theirs. Maybe I don't want your protection anymore, Stephanie said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Maybe I'm tired of being a pawn in everyone else's game. The silence that followed was deafening. Roca stared at her, something flickering in his eyes that might have been hurt before his expression hardened into stone. Is that what you think you are to me? A pawn? What else am I? Stephanie asked, her voice breaking. You don't trust me. You don't tell me the truth about anything. You just make demands and expect me to fall in line because you've decided you own me. I don't own you, Roca said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. But I am trying to keep you safe, even when you're too stubborn to see the danger you're in. By making all my choices for me? By giving you information you're too inexperienced to have on your own, Roca countered. He took a breath, visibly trying to calm himself. Stephanie, I know this world terrifies you. I know you didn't ask for any of this, but the Bianchis are not your salvation. They're predators, just like everyone else, including me. The admission surprised her. Roca never talked about himself like that, never showed weakness or doubt. Then what am I supposed to do? Stephanie asked, exhaustion seeping into her voice. Vincent said I have 48 hours to decide. If I say no, this war continues. People die, possibly me. If you say no, I handle the Bianchis, Roca said firmly. That's what you pay me for. That's what protection means. And if you can't? Roca crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders and forcing her to look at him. Then I die before they touch you. That's my promise. That's what your grandfather's loyalty bought. My family's loyalty in return. Blood for blood. Stephanie searched his face, looking for the lie, but found only fierce determination. And something else. Something that looked almost like fear. Not for himself, but for her. I need time to think, she whispered. You have 24 hours, Roca said, releasing her. After that, I make the decision for you, because like it or not, Stephanie, you're mine to protect, and I don't let what's mine go without a fight. Stephanie spent the next 18 hours locked in her apartment, pacing, thinking, and second-guessing every instinct she had. Roca's men remained stationed outside, a constant presence that felt less like protection and more like a cage. She'd tried calling her mother twice, but couldn't bring herself to explain any of this. What would she even say? By the time dawn broke on the 2nd day, she still hadn't decided. Marriage to a stranger to end a war, or stay with Roca and trust that his protection meant something more than possession. Both options felt like surrender. She was making coffee, her hands shaking from too little sleep and too much caffeine, when the first gunshot shattered her window. Glass exploded inward, spraying across her kitchen floor. Stephanie dropped to the ground on instinct, her heart slamming against her ribs. More gunshots followed, rapid and deafening, coming from the street below. Someone pounded on her door. Miss Marchetti, we need to move you now. Stephanie crawled toward the door, staying low as more bullets punched through her windows. She yanked it open to find one of Roca's men, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead, his gun drawn. They're here, he said grimly. The Bianchis, full assault team. We need to get you to the safe house. How many? Stephanie asked, her voice surprisingly steady despite the terror coursing through her. Too many. He grabbed her arm, pulling her into the hallway. Another guard was already there, weapon raised, covering their exit. Stairs, now. They made it down 2 flights before the stairwell door below them burst open. 3 men in tactical gear stormed in, weapons raised. Roka's guard shoved Stephanie behind him, returning fire. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, echoing off concrete walls. Go up! The guard shouted at her. Roof access! Stephanie ran, her legs burning as she climbed stairs, the sounds of the firefight following her. She could hear more men entering the building, boots thundering, voices shouting in Italian. This wasn't a kidnapping attempt. This was an invasion. She burst onto the roof, the morning air cold and sharp. The door slammed behind her, and she heard something heavy being dragged against it from the other side. One of Roka's men buying her time. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Roka's name flashed on the screen. Where are you? He demanded the second she answered. Roof of my building, Stephanie gasped, scanning the rooftop for any kind of escape. They're in the stairwell. Your men are holding them off, but there are too many. I'm 5 minutes out, Roka said. And she could hear the roar of an engine in the background. Stay away from the edges, my helicopter is coming for you. You have a helicopter? Stephanie asked, hysteria creeping into her voice. Stay alive for 5 minutes, Stephanie. That's all I need. The line went dead just as the rooftop door shuddered under heavy impacts. They were breaking through. Stephanie looked around frantically. The building was 6 stories, too high to jump. Adjacent buildings were too far to reach. She was trapped. The pounding on the door intensified, and she heard the crack of wood beginning to splinter. Then she heard it. The distinctive whoop 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 of helicopter blades cutting through air. A sleek black helicopter rose above the building's edge, and Stephanie's heart leaped with hope. But it wasn't coming from the direction she expected. It was rising from the other side of the building, and as it swung around, she saw the Bianca family crest painted on its side. No, she whispered. The helicopter touched down on the roof, its blades still spinning, creating a whirlwind that nearly knocked her off her feet. The side door slid open, and Vincent Bianchi stepped out, flanked by armed men. Miss Marchetti, he called over the noise, your time is up, get in the helicopter. I'm not going anywhere with you, Stephanie shouted back. You don't have a choice anymore, Vincent said, his earlier politeness gone. My son is waiting. The wedding will happen today, with or without your cooperation. Get in the helicopter, or my men will put you in it. The rooftop door finally gave way, exploding outward. But instead of Bianca soldiers, Chris Roca himself emerged, flanked by a dozen armed men. Blood stained his shirt, and his eyes blazed with fury. Get away from her, Roca said, his voice deadly calm despite the chaos. Vincent's men raised their weapons. Roca's men did the same. Stephanie stood in the middle, the helicopter blades roaring overhead, both families training guns on each other with her as the center point. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed, Vincent called out. Let her come with us peacefully. The alliance will benefit both our families. Over my dead body, Roca replied. That can be arranged, Vincent said coldly. Time seemed to slow. Stephanie could see fingers tightening on triggers, could see the calculation in both men's eyes. This was it. The moment everything erupted into violence, and she would be the reason. People would die because 2 families wanted to own her like property. Something inside her snapped. Stop! Stephanie's voice cut through the noise, surprising even herself with its force. Everyone just stop! The men hesitated, confused. Even Roca and Vincent turned their attention to her. I said stop, Stephanie repeated, her voice steadier now. She walked forward, positioning herself directly between the 2 groups. Put your weapons down, all of you. Stephanie, get behind me, Roca ordered. No, she said firmly. I'm done taking orders, from you, From him, from anyone. She turned to face Vincent Bianchi. You want me to marry your son? To become a Bianca? Why? Because of some bloodline connection to a man who's been dead for 15 years? Because you think controlling me gives you leverage over old Moretti territories? Vincent's expression hardened. It's more complicated than that. No, it's really not, Stephanie said. You see me as a tool, a pretty piece to marry off and neutralize a threat. Well, I'm not a tool, I'm not property, and I'm not marrying anyone to settle your territorial disputes. She turned to Roca, whose jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle twitching. And you talk about protection like it's some noble thing, but you've been trying to control me from the moment we met. Deciding what I can know, who I can talk to, what choices I'm allowed to make. I was keeping you safe, Roca said through gritted teeth. You were keeping me compliant, Stephanie corrected. There's a difference. You both treat me like I'm some helpless thing that needs to be managed, but I'm the one who translated that conversation. I'm the one who stepped forward when everyone else was too afraid. I'm the one Antonio Marchetti chose to teach Italian to share stories with. Maybe he saw something in me that neither of you can. The wind from the helicopter blades whipped her hair around her face, but she stood her ground. Here's what's going to happen, Stephanie continued, her voice carrying authority she didn't know she possessed. I'm not marrying Marco Bianchi. I'm not becoming anyone's bargaining chip. But I'm also not going to be the reason you two slaughter each other on this rooftop. Then what are you proposing? Vincent asked, his tone skeptical. A truce, Stephanie said. Temporary, but binding. You both back off. No marriage alliances, no protection contracts, no claims of ownership. Give me 6 months to figure out my own path, to learn this world on my own terms. If after 6 months I decide I want an alliance with either of your families, I'll approach you. My choice, my terms. That's not how this works, Vincent said, shaking his head. Then make it work, Stephanie challenged. You're both powerful men. Surely you can manage a simple truce if it means avoiding a war that will cost you both money, men, and territory. She turned to Rocco. And you owe me this. You promised my grandfather's loyalty would be honored. Well, I'm asking you to honor it by respecting my autonomy. Let me make my own choices, even if they're mistakes. Rocca stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Pride, maybe, or recognition. You're serious. Completely, Stephanie said. The Bianchis won't honor a truce, Rocca said. The moment you're vulnerable, they'll take you. Then that's my risk to take, Stephanie replied. But I think Vincent is smarter than that, aren't you? Vincent studied her for a long moment, then slowly smiled. You're more like Antonio than anyone realized. He glanced at his men, then at Rocca. 6 months. But if you align with Rocca at the end of it, we'll consider it an act of war. And if she aligns with you, we'll respond accordingly, Rocca said, his voice hard. Then it's settled, Stephanie said, before either man could back out. 6 months, no interference, no protection details, no marriage proposals. I live my life, and you both stay out of it. You'll be vulnerable, Rocca warned. Maybe, Stephanie acknowledged. But I'll be free, and right now, that's worth the risk. Vincent gestured to his men, who lowered their weapons. He climbed back into the helicopter, pausing at the door. 6 months, Miss Marchetti, but understand this. The world you're choosing to navigate alone is more dangerous than you can imagine. I hope your grandfather's blood proves strong enough to see you through it. The helicopter lifted off, banking away from the building. Rocca's men slowly lowered their weapons as well, though they looked confused and unhappy about it. Rocca himself walked toward Stephanie, stopping just a few feet away. That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever seen, he said quietly. Maybe both, Stephanie admitted, her hands starting to shake now that the adrenaline was fading. You just made yourself a target for every family looking for leverage, Rocca continued. Without protection, you're exposed. I know, Stephanie said, but I need to do this. I need to know I can survive in this world on my own terms, not just as someone's protected asset. Roka studied her face, then nodded slowly. 6 months. But Stephanie, if you need me, you call. Truce or no truce, I'll come. I know, she said softly. Thank you. He turned to leave, then paused. Your grandfather would have been proud. He always said the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. I think I'm finally seeing what he meant. Then he was gone, his men following, leaving Stephanie alone on the rooftop, with the morning sun rising over the city. She had just gambled everything on her ability to survive in a world she barely understood. But for the first time since this all began, the choice had been completely hers, and that, she realized, was worth whatever came next. The first week of Stephanie's self-imposed independence was surprisingly quiet. No threatening phone calls, no mysterious cars following her, no armed men appearing at her door. It was almost enough to make her believe the truce might actually hold. She'd quit her job at La Dolce Vita. Too many memories, too many eyes watching. Instead, she took a position at a small language school in Brooklyn, teaching Italian to business people and retirees planning trips to Tuscany. The work was simple, honest, and blissfully removed from the world of power plays and territorial disputes. But the silence nagged at her. In a world where everyone seemed to want something from her, the sudden absence of pressure felt wrong, like the calm before a storm. On the 8th day, her mother called. Stephanie, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something. Her mother's voice sounded strained, tired in a way that went beyond her illness. It's about your father. Stephanie's stomach dropped. She hadn't spoken to her father since their conversation about her grandfather, and she'd been content to keep it that way. What about him? He's been asking about you, about where you're living now, what you're doing. He seems very interested in your life suddenly. Her mother paused. And there's something else. He's been meeting with people, serious-looking men in expensive suits. They come to the house sometimes when he thinks I'm sleeping. Ice crept down Stephanie's spine. What kind of men? I don't know, but Stephanie, I found something. Bank statements in his office. Large deposits, regular ones, going back months. Tens of thousands of dollars at a time. Her mother's voice cracked. I think he's involved in something dangerous, something he's been hiding from both of us. Mom, where is he now? He said he was going to his office, the accounting firm on Fifth Avenue. Stephanie, I'm scared. After everything you told me about your grandfather, about the families, I'm afraid your father... I'll handle it, Stephanie interrupted, already grabbing her keys. Stay home, lock the doors, don't let anyone in except me. She ended the call and stared at her phone, her mind racing. Her father had been receiving regular payments, large ones. From whom? And why? Then she remembered something Uncle Marco had said during their confrontation. I was trying to create options for you, not just for her, for them. Her uncle and her father working together. Stephanie pulled up her contact list and made a call she swore she wouldn't make. Roka answered on the first ring. I need information, she said without preamble. About my father, Thomas Marchetti. Stephanie, Roka's voice was carefully neutral. The truce means I don't monitor you anymore. That includes your family. I'm not asking you to monitor me. I'm asking for information you probably already have. She took a breath. My father has been receiving large payments, regular deposits. I think he's involved with the Bianchis, like my uncle was. Maybe deeper. Silence. Then, what makes you think that? My mother found bank statements, and things my uncle said before. They're starting to make sense now. Please, Chris. I need to know the truth. Another pause. She could hear him weighing his options, deciding how much to tell her. Your father has been on the Bianca payroll for 8 months, Roka finally said. Longer than your uncle. He's been feeding them information about old Moretti connections, helping them identify targets for recruitment, including you. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? Your appearance at La Dolce Vita wasn't an accident, Stephanie. Your father knew the Bianchis wanted access to someone with your bloodline. He made sure you were working that night, made sure you'd be in position to catch my attention. The whole thing was orchestrated. Stephanie leaned against the wall, her legs suddenly weak. He set me up. My own father used me as bait. He saw an opportunity and took it, Roca said, his voice hard. The Bianchis paid him well for it. They wanted someone inside my organization, someone I might trust because of their heritage. Your father delivered you on a silver platter. Why didn't you tell me? Stephanie demanded, anger cutting through the shock. Because I had no proof until recently. And because I knew what it would do to you. Roca's tone softened slightly. I'm sorry, Stephanie, but you asked for the truth. She ended the call without saying goodbye and stood in her apartment, shaking with rage and betrayal. Her father, the man who was supposed to protect her, guide her, love her unconditionally. He'd sold her out for money. Stephanie grabbed her jacket and headed for the door. She was done with secrets and manipulation. If her father wanted to play games with her life, he was going to answer for it. The accounting firm on Fifth Avenue occupied the 14th floor of a sleek glass building. Stephanie rode the elevator up, her heart pounding with each floor that passed. She'd called ahead, pretending to be a client. The receptionist had confirmed her father was in his office. She walked past the receptionist without signing in, ignoring the woman's protests. Her father's office was at the end of the hall, his name etched on the frosted glass door. She didn't knock. Thomas Marchetti looked up from his computer, his expression shifting from surprise to poorly concealed guilt when he saw her face. Stephanie, what are you? 8 months, she interrupted, closing the door behind her. You've been working with the Bianchis for 8 months. You set me up. You orchestrated the whole thing. Her father's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. Stephanie's voice rose despite her attempt to stay calm. I know about the payments. I know you told them where I worked, when I worked, that I spoke Italian. You served me up to them like I was just another business transaction. Thomas stood slowly, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Stephanie, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you sold out your own daughter? How you used me to get money from a mafia family? Her voice broke. You're my father. You were supposed to protect me. I was protecting us, Thomas shot back, his own anger flaring. Do you have any idea how much debt we're in? Your mother's medical bills alone are drowning us. Your grandfather left nothing but secrets and connections to dangerous people. I was trying to turn those connections into something useful, something that could save our family. By sacrificing me? By giving you an opportunity, Thomas insisted. The Bianchis weren't going to hurt you. They wanted you as an asset, someone who could eventually bridge the gap between the old families and the new order. They promised protection, money, security. Everything I couldn't provide on my own. Stephanie stared at her father, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the distant, disappointed man she'd grown up with, but someone weaker. Someone who'd let fear and desperation turn him into something monstrous. You didn't give me an opportunity, she said quietly. You took away my choice. You decided my life was worth less than your debt. That's not fair, Thomas protested. You don't understand the pressure I was under. You're right. I don't understand how a father could do this to his child. Stephanie moved toward the desk, bracing her hands on it. Did you know they would try to force me to marry Marco Bianchi? Did you know about that part of the plan? Thomas looked away, and that was answer enough. Oh my God, Stephanie breathed. You knew they would try to trap me in a marriage and you let it happen anyway. It wouldn't have been a trap, Thomas said weakly. The Bianchis are a powerful family. You would have been protected, provided for. I would have been property. Stephanie slammed her hand on the desk. Is that what you wanted for me? To be some gangster's trophy wife, stuck in a life I never chose? I wanted you to be safe, Thomas said, but his voice lacked conviction. After your grandfather died, I swore I'd keep our family out of that world. But the world doesn't let you stay out once you're connected. I thought if I could control how you entered it, if I could negotiate the terms, maybe you'd have a better chance than I did. You thought wrong, Stephanie said. All you did was make me a target for everyone. The Bianchis wanted to own me. Rocca saw me as his grandfather's debt to collect. And you, my own father, saw me as currency. Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice remained steady. I stood on a rooftop a week ago and gambled my life on the chance that I could navigate this world on my own terms. Do you know why I did that? Because every man in my life has tried to control me, to use me, to decide what's best for me without ever asking what I wanted. Stephanie. Thomas reached for her, but she stepped back. Don't touch me. She wiped her eyes roughly. I came here to hear you admit what you did, to see if there was any part of my father left in you. But there's not. You're just another player in this game, and I'm done letting players make decisions for me. What are you going to do? Thomas asked, fear creeping into his voice. I don't know yet, Stephanie admitted. But whatever I decide, it won't include you. You're not my family anymore. Family doesn't betray family for money. She turned toward the door. Stephanie, wait, Thomas called out. If you tell Rocca about this, if you tell him I was working with the Bianchis, he'll kill me. Stephanie paused, her hand on the door handle. She thought about it, really thought about it. How easy it would be to let Rocca handle her father the way he handled all his problems. How much simpler her life would be without this particular complication. But that wasn't who she was, and she refused to let this world turn her into someone who was. I'm not going to tell Rocca, she said without turning around. But not because you deserve my protection. Because I'm not going to have your blood on my hands. You're going to disappear. Leave the city. Start over somewhere else. If you're smart, you'll do it before either family realizes you've been playing both sides. I can't just leave your mother, Thomas protested. You should have thought of that before you betrayed us both. Now Stephanie did turn, her expression cold. You have 48 hours. After that, I can't promise someone won't come looking for you, and I won't lift a finger to stop them. She left the office, left the building, left her father to face the consequences of his choices. Outside, the city noise washed over her. Car horns and conversations and the endless hum of life continuing regardless of personal devastation. Her phone rang. Her mother's number. Stephanie answered. Mom, I need to tell you something about Dad. As she walked through the crowded streets, explaining everything to her mother, watching her old life crumble with each word, Stephanie realized something. She'd spent so long trying to stay out of this world, trying to be normal, trying to avoid her grandfather's legacy. But maybe the legacy wasn't the problem. Maybe it was everyone else's interpretation of what that legacy meant. Antonio Marchetti had been smart, resourceful, and loyal to the people who mattered. Those were the traits that had kept him alive in a dangerous world. Those were the traits she'd inherited. And maybe, just maybe, they were exactly what she needed to not just survive in this world, but to thrive in it on her own terms. 3 weeks after confronting her father, Stephanie received a package at her apartment. No return address, just her name written in elegant script on thick parchment paper wrapped around a small box. Inside was a single chess piece, a queen carved from black onyx with a note attached. The game isn't over. The 6 months aren't up. But patience has its limits. Choose wisely. V.B. Vincent Bianchi. A reminder that the truce was temporary, that eventually she'd have to pick a side or become the battlefield where both families fought. Stephanie set the chess piece on her kitchen counter and stared at it, trying to decide what it meant. A threat? A warning? An invitation? Her phone rang before she could parse it further. Rocca's number. Did you get a package today? He asked without greeting. A chess piece, Stephanie confirmed, from Vincent Bianchi. I got one too. A king. Roka's voice was tight. He's making a move, Stephanie. The truce was never meant to last the full 6 months. He was just buying time to consolidate power, and now he's ready to strike. Strike at what? At everything. My operations, my allies, my territories. Roka paused. And at you. The Queen is the most powerful piece on the board. He's telling you that's what you are, and he intends to capture you. Stephanie's stomach nodded. So what do we do? We? Roka's tone shifted, something warmer underneath the tension. I thought you were navigating this world on your own terms. I am, Stephanie said firmly. And my terms include not letting Vincent Bianca decide my future. So I'm asking you, as an ally, what's the plan? Silence. Then. Meet me at the waterfront warehouse on Pier 17 in 2 hours. Come alone, but armed if you can manage it. This ends tonight. The line went dead. Stephanie had never held a gun before 2 hours ago. Now she had a compact pistol tucked into her jacket pocket, acquired from a pawn shop that didn't ask questions if you paid cash. She had no idea if she could actually use it, but its weight was oddly comforting as she approached the warehouse. The building was massive, abandoned, the kind of place where important and terrible things happened away from witnesses. She could see lights through the broken windows, hear voices echoing inside. 2 of Roka's men stood guard at the entrance. They recognized her and stepped aside without a word. Inside, the warehouse had been transformed into something between a war room and an arena. Roka stood at the center with a dozen of his men, reviewing what looked like building schematics spread across a makeshift table. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable. You came, he said. You asked me to, Stephanie replied, walking toward him. What's happening? The Bianchis are planning to hit 3 of my operations simultaneously tonight. Restaurants, shipping routes, gambling establishments. They want to cripple my income and make me look weak. Roka gestured to the schematics. But I have people inside their organization. I know when and where they're moving. We're going to hit them first. That's going to start a war, Stephanie said. The war already started the moment Vincent sent those chess pieces, Roka corrected. This just decides who wins it. Stephanie studied the maps, her mind working through the implications. If you strike first, you look like the aggressor. Other families will see it as you breaking the truce. And if I wait, I look weak and unprepared, Roka countered. Either way, I'm fighting. I'd rather fight from a position of strength. There's another option, Stephanie said slowly, an idea forming. What if we give Vincent what he wants? Roka's eyes narrowed. Explain. He wants me, the Queen. What if I walk into his territory, offer myself as a hostage, and draw him out into a location of our choosing? Stephanie pointed to a building on the map. His main office. If I'm there, he'll come. And when he does, you'll be waiting. Absolutely not, Roka said immediately. I'm not using you as bait. Why not? You used me as leverage before. You claimed protection over me to make a point to other families. Stephanie met his gaze steadily. This time, I'm volunteering. This time, it's my choice. It's suicide, Roka argued. The moment you walk through that door, they'll lock you down. You'll have no way out. Unless you get me out, Stephanie said. You're good at that, aren't you? Dramatic rescues? Despite the tension, Roka's lips twitched into something almost like a smile. You're insane. I'm strategic, Stephanie corrected, and I'm tired of being a piece on everyone else's board. If this is going to end, I want to be part of ending it. Roka studied her for a long moment, then turned to his men. Give us the room. They filed out without question, closing the warehouse door behind them. When they were alone, Roka stepped closer, his voice dropping. Why are you really doing this? Because I'm tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of letting other people fight battles that are partly mine. Stephanie held his gaze. My grandfather's legacy made me a target, Fine. Then I'll use that legacy to end this. You could still walk away, Roka said quietly. Take your mother, leave the city, start over somewhere else. I'd help you disappear if that's what you wanted. Is that what you want? Stephanie asked. No, Roka admitted. But what I want isn't what's best for you. Let me decide what's best for me, Stephanie said. She reached up, her hand resting against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. You said your family owed mine loyalty. Blood for blood. Well, I'm calling in that debt. Help me end this. Roka covered her hand with his expression shifting to something vulnerable. If anything happens to you, then you'll avenge me spectacularly and tell everyone it was because I was brave and stupid, Stephanie finished. But nothing's going to happen because we're going to plan this perfectly. You have too much faith in planning, Roka said, but he was already moving back to the table, his tactical mind engaging. All right, if we're doing this, we're doing it right. 2 hours later, Stephanie stood outside Vincent Bianchi's office building, her heart pounding but her hands steady. She'd sent a text from a burner phone. I'm ready to talk. Meet me at your office. Alone. SM. The response had been immediate. 20 minutes. Come unarmed. She'd left the pistol with Roka's men, positioned around the building's perimeter. Roka himself was in a van 2 blocks away, monitoring everything through a communication device hidden in the button of her jacket. I can still call this off, Roka's voice came through the tiny earpiece. Say the word. I'm going in, Stephanie said quietly, then stepped through the building's entrance. The lobby was empty, eerily quiet. An elevator stood open, as if waiting specifically for her. She entered and pressed the button for the top floor. The ride up felt eternal. When the doors opened, Vincent Bianchi was waiting, flanked by 2 guards. Miss Marchetti, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. This is unexpected. Is it? Stephanie stepped out of the elevator, forcing confidence into her posture. You sent me a chess piece, a queen. I'm here to discuss what that means. Vincent gestured to his office. Please, let's talk privately. The office was opulent, all dark wood and leather with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Vincent dismissed his guards and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. I didn't expect you to surrender, he said, offering her a glass. I'm not surrendering, Stephanie said, accepting the drink but not tasting it. I'm proposing an alternative. I'm listening. End this. The conflict with Roka, the territorial disputes, all of it. Pull back, and I'll ensure Roka does the same. Stephanie set down her glass. Continue as you are, and you'll force me to pick a side. And Vincent, I promise you won't like the side I choose. Vincent's smile faded. You're bluffing. You have no power here. Don't I? Stephanie pulled out her phone, pulling up a document. I spent the last 3 weeks learning everything I could about this world, including the fact that my grandfather didn't just work with the Morettis. He kept records, names, dates, transactions, everything that happened during his time with your family's operations. She watched Vincent's expression shift to alarm. Those records are currently in a safe location, Stephanie continued. If anything happens to me, they go to the FBI. If you continue this war with Roka, they go to the FBI. If you ever threaten my family again, they go to the FBI. Are we clear? You're lying, Vincent said, but doubt crept into his voice. Am I? Stephanie met his gaze steadily. Do you really want to test that? The office door burst open. Marco Bianca, Vincent's son, stormed in with 3 armed men. He looked drunk, his eyes wild and dangerous. This is the bitch who embarrassed us? Marco snarled. Who rejected my marriage proposal? Marco, not now, Vincent said sharply. No, this ends now, Marco said, pulling out a gun. She's been playing us all, and I'm done with it. Everything happened at once. The windows exploded inward as Roka's men rappelled from the roof. The office door burst open again as more of Roka's forces flooded in. Gunfire erupted, deafening in the enclosed space. Stephanie dove behind the desk as bullets tore through the air. She could hear Roka's voice in her earpiece shouting commands, coordinating his men. Through the chaos, she saw Marco turning his gun toward her, his face twisted with rage. Time seemed to slow. Her hand went to her pocket, remembering too late that she'd left the pistol behind. Then Roka was there, materializing between her and Marco, his own weapon raised. The shot was precise, controlled. Marco went down, his gun clattering across the floor. The firefight lasted less than 3 minutes. When the smoke cleared, Marco and 2 of his men were down, wounded but alive. Vincent stood with his hands raised, surrounded by Roka's forces. Roka pulled Stephanie to her feet, his hands running over her, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Stephanie breathed. "You came." "I told you I would," Roka said, then turned to Vincent. "This war is over. You're done. Your operations in the city are finished. Leave now, and you get to walk away. Stay, and what happened to your son will look merciful by comparison." Vincent looked at his wounded son, then at Stephanie, his expression bitter. "Antonio Marchetti's granddaughter. I should have known she'd be the one to end us." "Not end," Stephanie corrected, stepping forward despite Roka's protective grip. "Just redirect. Take your family somewhere else. Build something new. But leave this city and leave us alone. That's the deal." Vincent stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're more dangerous than your grandfather ever was." He would have been proud. As Roka's men escorted the Bianchis out, Stephanie finally allowed herself to breathe. It was over. Really over. Roka turned to her, his expression torn between fury and admiration. "That was the most reckless thing you've ever done." "It worked," Stephanie pointed out. "It could have gotten you killed," Roka said, but he was pulling her close, his arms wrapping around her like he was afraid she might disappear. "Don't ever do that to me again." "I can't promise that," Stephanie said, her voice muffled against his chest. "This is my world now too. I'm going to make my own moves." Roka pulled back enough to look at her, his hand cupping her face. "Then we make them together. No more secrets, no more protection that looks like control. We're partners, real partners, if you're willing." Stephanie searched his eyes, finding the truth in them. Not the mafia boss, not the dangerous man everyone feared, but the person underneath. Flawed, complicated, but honest in this moment. "I'm willing," she said, "but on my terms." "Always on your terms," Roka agreed, and when he kissed her, it felt like a beginning rather than an end. 6 months later, Stephanie walked into La Dolce Vita, not as a waitress but as a patron. The restaurant had changed hands, now operating under one of Roka's legitimate business ventures. She and Roka had worked to transform several operations, making them legal while maintaining the family's influence. Maria, promoted to manager, greeted her warmly. "Your usual table, Miss Marchetti?" "Please," Stephanie said, smiling at the title. She'd kept her grandfather's name, a reminder of where she came from and the legacy she'd chosen to reshape rather than run from. Roka was already seated, reviewing contracts for their latest venture, a translation services company that would provide legitimate work for people looking to escape more dangerous aspects of the criminal world. It was small, but it was a start. "The Bianchis officially left the city yesterday," Roka reported as she sat down. "Vincent took what was left of his family to Philadelphia. Word is, he's going legitimate too." "Good," Stephanie said. She'd kept her grandfather's records, but she'd also kept her promise. The information stayed private as long as the peace held. Roka reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "No regrets?" Stephanie thought about it, about the shy waitress she'd been, about the complicated woman she'd become, about the violence and danger and impossible choices, about the family she'd lost and the partnership she'd gained. "Some," she admitted, "but not about this, not about us." "Good," Roka said, his rare, genuine smile appearing. "Because I have a proposal for you." He pulled out a small box, and Stephanie's breath caught. Not a chess piece this time. Something real, something chosen, something that represented a future built on actual partnership rather than obligation or legacy. "Marry me," Rocco said simply, "not because of bloodlines or protection or strategic alliances, because I love you and I want to build something new with you, something better than what came before." Stephanie looked at the ring, then at the man offering it. The dangerous, complicated, surprisingly vulnerable man who'd gone from adversary to ally to something more, who'd learned to see her as a partner rather than a pawn, who'd changed because she'd refused to let him stay the same. "Yes," she said, and watched his expression transform into pure joy. Outside the restaurant, the city continued its endless rhythm. But inside, at a table where a frightened waitress had once served powerful men, Stephanie Marchetti made a choice that was entirely her own, not running from her grandfather's legacy, but redefining it. Not surviving in the mafia world, but transforming it from within. She'd come a long way from the shy woman who'd stepped forward to translate a conversation. But then again, maybe that woman had always been there, waiting for the right moment to emerge, waiting for the courage to claim her own power and write her own story. And this, Stephanie thought as Roca slipped the ring onto her finger, was just the beginning. 1 year later, Stephanie stood in front of the mirror in what had once been her grandfather's study, now converted into her private office. The room was filled with his old books, his chess set displayed prominently on the desk, and framed photographs of him with her grandmother, images she'd never seen before, found tucked away in boxes her mother had finally felt strong enough to share. Her mother was healthier now, the surgery successful, paid for with legitimate earnings from the businesses Stephanie and Roca had built together. Her brother had graduated, debt-free, and was working as a translator for the UN. Her father had disappeared, reportedly living in Arizona under a new name. She didn't miss him. Uncle Marco had tried to reach out once, a letter of apology that Stephanie had burned without reading. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, only moved past. The translation company had expanded beyond anyone's expectations. Dozens of employees, contracts with international corporations, a reputation for discretion and excellence. It provided legitimate work for people trying to leave the underworld, giving them the same second chance Stephanie had fought for herself. She adjusted the simple gold chain around her neck, a wedding gift from Roca, engraved with Italian words her grandfather used to say, "La famiglia è tutto, ma la scelta è tua." Family is everything, but the choice is yours. Ready? Roca appeared in the doorway, dressed in a sharp suit, looking every bit the powerful businessman he'd become. The criminal empire hadn't disappeared, but it had evolved, transformed into something that operated in the gray areas between legal and illegal, always staying just on the right side of the line. "Almost," Stephanie said, gathering the documents for today's meeting. They were negotiating a partnership with a European firm, entirely legitimate, entirely above board, the kind of deal her grandfather would have been proud to see. "You know," Rocco said, walking over to wrap his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder as they both looked at their reflection. "When I offered you $15 million to translate that conversation, I never imagined this is where we'd end up." "What did you imagine?" Stephanie asked, leaning back against him. "That you'd be terrified of me, that I'd use you for what you represented, and then you'd disappear back into whatever life you came from." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I definitely didn't imagine falling in love with you, or building a life with you, or becoming a better man because you refused to accept anything less." Stephanie turned in his arms, her hands resting against his chest. "And I never imagined that the shy waitress serving tables would become this. But maybe that's the point. We don't get to imagine our futures, we get to create them." "Antonio would be proud," Roca said softly, "of the woman you've become, of what you've built from his legacy." I hope so, Stephanie said. But even if he wouldn't be, I'm proud. And that's enough. They left the office together, partners in every sense of the word, walking into a future they were writing on their own terms. The mafia world still existed around them, dangerous and complicated as ever. But Stephanie had learned something her grandfather had always known. You don't survive by running from that world or by letting it consume you. You survive by understanding it, respecting it, and refusing to let it define you. And in the end, that made all the difference.
Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.